his kind of developing of right view, the way that he was looking at the world. And now today we're going to look more at the practices that he did. After he kind of established right view, he kind of then went forth, and then he started practicing. So what did the Buddha to be? What did he actually do? What should we be doing? How should we be good disciples of the Buddha? To practice in a similar kind of way. And so I'm going to look at a few suttas that I don't normally look at on the retreat. So those of you who come to my retreats before, it's going to be a little bit of new material. And one of these suttas is the one that you see right here, the Fear and Dread Sutta. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Fear and dread. So this is found in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourse of the Buddha, the fourth discourse. And this is one of the many autobiographical suttas of the Buddha. And so we're going to have a look at this and see what comes of it. So, all right. Are you ready for fear and dread? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm glad you are game. So we're going to see what happens. So this is how it goes. So I have heard. At one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. Then the Brahmin Janusoni went up to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. So the Brahmin Janusoni, he was one of the main Brahmins in King Pasenadi's court. The kings, they had all kind of Brahmins who look after because they were the educated people, they would look after the affairs and maybe the finances and maybe whatever. And so he was one of these famous Brahmins in that court, and he was also a disciple of the Buddha, together with the king himself. So many important people were Buddhist from the earliest time. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, Master Gautama, those gentlemen who have gone forth from the lay life to homelessness out of faith in Master Gautama, they have Master Gautama to lead the way, help them out, and give them encouragement. So the idea here, the idea of the word gentleman, the Pali word is kullaputta, which literally means the son of a clan, or maybe the daughter of a clan. The idea of putta is it's a male, usually male, but the point is that in Pali language, the male takes precedence. So if there's both male and female, it just means children, basically. So children of clans, and clans, they are the kind of the establishment in India. These are the people who are educated, who own property and these kind of things. And so gentleman is a nice translation, or gentlewoman, or gentle person, something like that. These are the kind of the proper people, if you like, of ancient Indian society. So I agree with Bhante Sujata's translation here. Maybe gentle person would be better if you want to make it a bit more gender neutral, which is nice. But I guess gentleman is a more common word than gentle person. So they have gone forth from lay life to homelessness out of faith. This is kind of the critical word here. You don't go forth for all kind of dodgy reasons. To kind of make sure you have enough food. I mean, this is good enough reason to become a monk. You just become a monk, you come to BF and you have this lunch over here. Wow, that's good enough reason to become a monk, right? When you see that lunch, you think, yes. But that's kind of, it's not really quite right. If you thought that I had gone forward just to enjoy your lunch, maybe you wouldn't be so inspired. Maybe that wouldn't be quite sufficient. But the reality is that people go forth for all kinds of reasons. But of course the proper reason is to have some confidence in these teachings that they actually lead somewhere. And when you have confidence in those teachings, then you're going to have the right intention, the right aim, the goal, the purpose of the practice, and you're going to practice accordingly. But if you go forth because, you are kind of the fifth child in the family and all your brothers and sisters are really sharp and they become doctors and lawyers, but you're the dum-dum in the family. Okay, go forth, become a monk or a nun. You're useless anyway, so we... That's not the same, right? So if anyone is going to go forth in the family, make sure it is the bright ones that go forth. They are the ones that are really useful, not the dum-dums in the family. Dum-dums can also go forth, because sometimes, I think sometimes we are prejudiced in our society against people who are not super-duper intelligent. And this is actually a bad idea, because wisdom is much more profound than intelligence. And sometimes you find people who are not necessarily very good academically, but turn out to be really bright in terms of life, in terms of wisdom, in terms of living well, in terms of being, good people. So sometimes we have to be, I shouldn't be kind of overdo this kind of way of thinking about things, but actually it is a way of prejudice sometimes. Anyway, you have faith, right, in the Buddha. That's when you go forth. Confidence in these teachings is a very important point. And it is the establishment in society. These are the people that go forth. And so they have Master Gautama to lead the way, to help them and give them encouragement. And this is kind of the point of this whole teaching we're doing now, is the idea of looking at the Buddha to be here. What did the Buddha to be? How did he practice? So this is kind of exactly what he's saying here, that we follow in the footsteps of the Buddha to be. We look at how he practiced. The Buddha tells us this is what I did, because I did this, you should do the same thing. I am a human being, you are the human being. We have exactly the same problems. They need to be resolved in the same way. And it's such an important point. And I think this often gets lost in Buddhism. And the further away we get from the time of the Buddha, the more we kind of put the Buddha on this pedestal of the miracles and the transcendent consciousness of the universe, the ground of all existence, and the Dhammakaya, and these kind of words and these kind of ideas that make the Buddha really distant and hard to relate to. But the Buddha is not like that. The Buddha, the historical Buddha, the real Buddha, the Buddha that really matters, he's a human being, just like us. He had the same problems that we had before his awakening. So this brings this out. We follow the practice of the Buddha. So this is just the Buddha himself saying that this is the case. Well, actually, this is Janusoni, but obviously it is accepted by the tradition, otherwise it wouldn't be there. So the Buddha helps them, encourages them, So that's kind of nice. And we can also be encouraged by the Buddha. Are you encouraged by the Buddha? When you read the suttas, it's kind of nice, right? The Buddha is encouraging you, and the Buddha is your teacher. I find that really, I always like that thought that the Buddha is my teacher, your teacher, our teacher. It's a beautiful way of thinking, because sometimes people think that the Buddha, he just taught the people in front of him 2,500 years ago, these Indians in India, different culture, different time, and these were the people who got his teachings. But actually that's the wrong way of thinking here. The idea is that the Buddha is your teacher. And I say this often, but I will say it again, because I think it's very interesting to contemplate this in the right way. When the Buddha gave his teachings 2,500 years ago, he knew that he was setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. He says that in the suttas, I'm setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. What does that mean? Well, what it means, the wheel of the Dhamma is like when you teach, there's a certain power to those teachings. And because they are so powerful, people practice accordingly, and then they pass it on to the next generation. There's a momentum to that wheel of the Dhamma. It rolls on in the world by itself, simply through the power of the Dhamma. And because of that, it goes on from generation to generation, from culture to culture, from era to era. And it goes on like this, whether we want to or not, because of the power of the message of the Buddha. People want to pass it on. I have the secret to life. I'm going to pass it on to you here. The Buddha's Dhamma is the secret to life itself. It is about the meaning of life. And so once this kind of becomes clear, then you realize the Buddha, when he taught, because he knew that he was setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, he was not just teaching the audience in front of him. He was teaching all those future generations that he knew would be listening to these teachings. And we are those future generations, right? So when he gave those teachings, he wasn't just teaching the people in front of him, he was teaching all those people who would listen to these teachings in the future. And that is why the suttas are so relatable. If you try to read other religious texts, take the ancient religious texts in India, things called the Vedas and the Upanishads and these things, and you realize you're entering a different culture completely. It's very hard to relate to. You're entering this kind of religious sphere where people think about the world in a way which is very difficult for us to relate to because it belongs to that culture, that time and place. They were spoken, obviously, to a particular people at a particular time. And that is true of the vast majority of religious teachings in the world. They were spoken to a certain people at a certain time. The Buddha Suttas stand out for their universal applicability to almost anyone who listens. So this is the point. Yeah? So when you read the suttas, remember the Buddha is actually teaching you. And when you know that, you start to read the suttas in a different way because you know that he's trying to convey a message to you. What is he trying to convey here? You start to really look at the teachings in a new way here. You think, wait, okay, let me contemplate this properly. What is he trying to say here? This must be an important message. Okay, the Buddha says, I'm getting old. Right, but I know this already. So what is he trying to say when he says, you're getting old? Is he trying to say something more than I understand? Maybe he is, yeah. And this is kind of the point. Simple teachings. So much of the Buddha's Dhamma is so simple. It's so straightforward. It's things that we think we know already, but it hasn't really sunk in properly. And this is what this is about. It's allowing the simple things to sink in. What does it mean to be kind? We know that, but we don't know it. It is profound. Kindness is a very profound thing. And only by fully understanding the depth and profundity of kindness and putting it into practice in your own life, that is when things really start to change. All right. So, and those people follow Master Gautama's example, right? This is exactly what I was saying. You follow the Master Gautama's example. You follow in his footsteps. You do what he did. That is so true, Brahmin. Everything you say is true, Brahmin. But Master Gautama, remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest are challenging. It is hard to maintain seclusion and hard to find joy in solitude. The forest seems to rob the mind of a mendicant who isn't immersed in samadhi, who isn't stilled in samadhi. Yeah, we saw this just yesterday about the idea that it is hard to, seclusion or renunciation is difficult. And here we have the same idea again. If you go into the wilderness, the forest, and you might get robbed. You lose your mind. This is essentially what it is saying. If someone doesn't attain samadhi. So it's not just about isn't immersed in samadhi, but someone who doesn't attain samadhi, I think is actually more appropriate translation here. It's not the fact that you are not immersed in it, but that you don't have the ability to attain it. That's really the point here. So I want to tell off Ajahn Sudatta a little bit for that one. So that's one of my joys in life is to tell him off and not No, I wouldn't dare to do that. But anyway, so this is true, right? If you try to go into solitude, you're not ready, your mind starts to play tricks on you. It may not be obvious, but if you do, and especially if you stay in solitude over very long periods of time, the mind really can start to play tricks on you because your defilements start to work on you. If you get upset and angry, there's no one to get upset and angry for, and it kind of eternalizes and it kind of disturbs your mind and it causes all kind of problems. The same thing with desires, because there's no way of playing those desires out when you're in solitude, and so they kind of start to create havoc with you within. That's basically what happens. So let's see what the Buddha has to say about this. That is so true, Brahmin. Everything you say is true. Before my awakening, back to the Buddha to be again, when I was still unawakened but intent on awakening, I too thought, remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest are challenging. It is hard to maintain seclusion and hard to find joy in solitude. Here is the Buddha to be saying exactly the same thing. Yeah, even for the Buddha to be, the forest seemed challenging, and it's hard to find joy in solitude. Right? This idea that it is hard to find joy in solitude is, of course, very important. If you're going to have seclusion, you have to find joy in that seclusion. And the joy in seclusion is always the joy of meditation practice. That is the joy of seclusion. It's called the paviveka sukha. Paviveka sukha is actually the happiness of seclusion. And that really is. You see the word paviveka right there in the Pali. This is, you find this throughout the suttas, paviveka sukha, meaning the happiness of seclusion, meaning the jhana states and the samadhi and all of these things. So even the Buddha to be, so we are in good company, as they say here. I'm not sure who they are, but that's what they say. The forest do seem to rob the mind of a mendicant who does not gain samadhi. Then I thought, there are ascetics and Brahmins with unpurified conduct of body, speech and mind who frequent remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest. Those ascetics and Brahmins summon unskillful fear and dread because of these defects in their conduct. Lots of people go into solitude, but they haven't actually purified the basic conduct yet of body, speech and mind. And then if you have all of these defilements there, that is when fear and dread starts to arise. And it's interesting, the more unpurified your conduct is, the more dodgy your character is and all these kind of things, the more difficult and scary it is going to be in solitude. This is what I mentioned before about if you are angry or have desires, it doesn't have anywhere to go and you kind of internalize it, start playing with your mind. But it's also the case that the way that we look at the world is the way we feel the world looks at us. So if you have a lot of anger with the world, or you have upset with the world, or you treat the world badly, by the world I mean other people, if you treat others badly, there is the sense that the other people will also treat you badly. Because our perception of the world is also how we feel the world will treat us back. So if you have a lot of desire, you think that everyone else has lots of desire. If you think that you have a lot of anger, you think everyone else has a lot of anger. So if you have a lot of anger, you're going to be afraid in the forest because you are fearful of the ghosts being angry, maybe some human beings being angry, the animals being angry with you, whatever. Everything is going to be out to scare you and be frightening because you have those defilements within you already. And this is, I think, this is just a basic human psychology. We tend to think that other beings and other people are just like us. And that's why we can't understand others. Why are they thinking like this? What do they mean? I don't understand it. We tend to think that other people think exactly like that. That's completely wrong, of course, but that's how we tend to think things. And so if you want to have a happy life, there's some very interesting psychological things that comes out of this. If you want to be happy and you want to feel at ease in society and you want to feel that other people look at you in a positive way and all of these kind of things, be kind to others. The moment you are kind to others, you see the good qualities in others, you have metta and compassion for others, you start to feel the compassion and the metta and the kindness of people around you. And if you are able to forgive the faults in others, you also feel like others will forgive your faults. Because the way we see others is the way we feel the world looks back to us. Well, this is really beautiful, right? It's not just about living well. Actually, when you live well, you feel at ease in the world. You feel good in the world. You feel relaxed. And you feel that other people, in a sense, will treat you in the same way. And that's great. So whether other people actually do treat you well or not, actually it becomes irrelevant because you are at ease with the way things are. So, the benefits of kindness and living well are actually very profound and very beautiful, and they lead you to all these extra benefits that may not seem obvious when you start out. So much coffee everywhere, sister. This is not coffee, this is something else. Some tea, that's tea. Yeah, that's tea. This is coffee over here, I think. Yeah. Oh, this looks more like coffee. Okay, I apologize to the bringer of the tea, but I'm going to go for the coffee. All right, so so this is what happens. So he realized all these other ascetics and Brahmins, they are not purified. That's why they have a problem. And then he thinks, but I don't frequent remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest with unpurified conduct of body, speech, and mind. My conduct is purified. I'm one of those noble ones who frequent remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest with purified conduct of body, speech, and mind. So he realized that he has got his act together, and so that's why he can then probably go into the forest, because he doesn't have these issues. So this gives you an idea of what is the kind of the minimum requirement for seclusion. You have to be fairly pure, and then you can go into seclusion. Of course, there is like a semi-seclusion. When you stay in a monastery or you stay in a retreat center, it's easy to deal with because it's not really seclusion. What we're talking about here is like really, really strong seclusion, like staying for weeks and months on end, just by yourself, in living at the foot of a tree or something like that. This is kind of the real deal, as they say here. So then, after this, the Buddha goes through a large number of defilements and a large number of qualities that are required to live by yourself. And those defilements can be summarized as the 5 hindrances. They can be summarized as an interest in the world. When you're interested in the world, you live in the forest, well, you obviously have a problem because that interest is not going to be satisfied in any way whatsoever. So, and then it goes on to what is roughly equivalent to the 5 spiritual faculties. And the more you have of these spiritual faculties, the more ready you are to also live in seclusion. Because the 5 hindrances, they are like the abandoning of the bad qualities. But having the spiritual faculties is like building up the good qualities. So you want to abandon the bad ones and you want to build up the good ones. These are like inverses of each other. And the more you have of all of this, the better off you're going to be here. I'm going to indulge in this seat. This seat has a nice backrest. And I'm going to kind of sit back and really... So, and this is kind of very common thing that you see in the sutras, that on the one hand you want to abandon the bad qualities, on the other hand you want to develop the good qualities. You find the 5 hindrances versus the 7 factors of awakening, for example, the 5 hindrances versus the 5 spiritual faculties. One goes down, one goes up. Reduce one, build up the other one. And this is essentially what is going on here. I'm not going to go through every one of these because it's going to take too much time. And it may not be that super duper interesting anyway. Actually, everything is interesting depending on how you read it, but so sorry, all this interesting stuff just all going here. So then, after having made sure that he has all the right qualities, then the Buddha thinks. Then I thought, this is before his awakening again here. You will have noticed, by the way, the Buddha calls himself a noble one there before. I don't know if you saw that. And even though he is not really a noble one at this stage, the practice is noble. So it's considered the noble search, part of what we call the noble search. So these words they don't always mean exactly the same thing in the sutras. There's a variety of meanings, and this is important to be aware of, so you don't lose that sense of the broadness of the meaning of some of these terms. Anyway, then I thought there are certain nights that are recognized as specially portentous. Portentous means like especially what is a good what is another word for this word? Like especially auspicious, yeah, or something like that. Auspicious, portentous, like they have a special power to them, right? They are kind of they are interesting. Yeah, and these nights are the 14th, 15th, and the 8th of a fortnight. On such nights, why don't I stay in awe-inspiring and hair-raising shrines in parks, forests, and trees? In such lodgings, perhaps I might see that fear and dread. Yeah, so these are the special nights, the 14th, 15th, and the 8th of the fortnight. This is when the moon kind of becomes either new or full, and the 8th is when the moon is half, yeah? And so these are, I don't know if you, hello, wow, that's a young one, that's really just starting out on the path, okay. So, is it a girl or a boy? Is it a girl, is it? Is it a girl? It's a girl, yeah. Zero. Okay, so that's kind of the pink kind of trousers give it away. So okay, okay, very good. So wow, that's very, very courageous to come here already now at that age. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. Okay, welcome. So these are the special nights. Yeah, when the moon is full, the moon is new, or the moon is half. And I don't know if you have ever been to the. Have you been to the forest when the moon is full? Yeah, it's quite different. In Singapore, it's not the same. In Singapore, there's too much light pollution, as they call it. Yeah, you can't really see the stars all that well, or the moon all that well. Sometimes you can if you go to, up on kind of some of the little hills behind here. It's a bit darker up there. Have you been at night up on the hilltop walk here? I've been at night up there. It's really quite nice actually. It gets really dark up there. Surprisingly so in Singapore, but there's still light pollution around. But when you go to places like our monastery in Perth, it's like really pitch black, yeah, and you can see every single star in the sky. And then when the moon comes out, the moon lights up the whole landscape. You can see the trees and you can see the kangaroos. And it's this soft, gentle light coming from the moon. And it's really beautiful. And it's very inspiring. And they say either you get inspired or you go crazy. The old saying is that there are werewolves, right, on these kind of nights. Wow, that's really, really interesting. So that's one of those two options. And so these are very inspiring nights, and they also kind of have this kind of this supernatural power to them, because the light is lots of shades and the trees, and you can't see very well, but you can see a little bit. You can see just enough to get really frightened. Yeah, that's kind of the. So these are awe-inspiring nights, and especially also on the dark fortnight when the moon is new and there is kind of no light. All the light is just the starlight. It can get very, very dark at night as well. So these are the nights when the Buddha-to-be, yeah, because the Buddha-to-be, he doesn't kind of mess around. So then he goes to these awe-inspiring and hair-raising shrines. Shrines in the parks, forests, and trees. And I don't know how much you have of that in Singapore, but it's quite common in Buddhist countries around the world that people have shrines in their gardens. Yeah, at the back of the house they have a shrine for the ancestors, and they will kind of maybe put some food there for the ghosts and these kind of things. It's a very common thing in the Buddhist world, and I think it's probably part of the Chinese tradition as well, yeah, to some extent, to have these shrines, yeah. It's a very common kind of thing, yeah. And I think there's something to that. It is not just a superstition. I think these things can actually have some kind of effect. So it's a good thing to do. But it's also scary, right? Because in the middle of the forest, there's a shrine where everyone goes and they leave something for the ancestors or whatever. And that is exactly where you expect to find ghosts, right? This is exactly the place. So these are the places that really are hair-raising and kind of, scary and all of these kind of things. And that's where the Buddha-to-be, where he goes in the middle of the forest just by himself. No one else is around, right? Ajahn Brahmali always tells the story when he was a young monk in Thailand. And when he was a young monk in Thailand, there was one place you could always go and there would be no one around. You could live completely at peace. And that was the charnel ground. Yeah, the Thais have been brought up on a diet of ghost stories. And because of that, they are really afraid of ghosts. So the charnel ground is the last place they want to be. Yeah, Most Westerners haven't been brought up on a diet or ghost stories, okay, charnel ground, whatever, so you go to the charnel ground. And Ajahn Brahmali says, when he wanted to go to the charnel ground, he would tell his kind of Thai friends or monastics, oh, I'm going off to meditate. No, don't go. And they would try to hold him back, yeah? Too dangerous. That's kind of very sweet. So these are good places, right? And this is what the Buddha to be recognized. And he did it specifically to see if that fear and dread would come. Yeah? So he was going to test himself. That's kind of the idea of the Buddha. And this is one of those things that I was mentioning yesterday, that sometimes we are too paralyzed in our life by fear. We allow fear, we allow a sense of lack of confidence and diffidence to rule our lives. And this apparently is quite common in the world. And sometimes we need to challenge ourselves. We need to do things that actually are outside our comfort zone. And I would really recommend you sometimes not to allow your life to be ruled by fear. Sometimes do challenge yourself. Do things that are outside of your comfort zone. And I don't mean working longer hours. That's not what I mean at all. What I mean is do things that are unusual. Yeah, okay, I'm having a job that actually really sucks, but I need the money, so I'm just going to keep on working. Quit your job. Do something else, right? Sometimes you need to do things that actually are a bit courageous. Otherwise, your life is going to be, according to that lack of courage. So the courageous people in the world, they are often the ones who... We are able to deal with things far better sometimes than we think we are. We are too afraid of kind of doing challenging things. And most people find that actually they can deal with it when they try. Yeah? You have a lot of resources within you that you may not be aware of. So this is what the Buddha to be does. We should follow in his footsteps, right? Remember that. Okay. Sometime later, that's what I did. As I was staying there, a deer came by, or a peacock snapped a twig, or the wind rustled the leaves. When it's really dark and these things happen, it's kind of scary. It's because you don't see what's going on. You don't know what's happening here. And so all you hear is the sounds. And because you can't see, the sounds are magnified 100-fold. Yeah? You hear those sounds very, very clearly. And it sounds like a ghost or whatever. One of the kind of weird things in Australia, if you stay in the forest there, is that the kangaroos tend to sound like human beings. Especially at night. Yeah? Because the kangaroos, sometimes they jump, but sometimes they just walk. When they jump, they don't sound like humans. But when they walk, put the paws down and the back legs, it sounds just like a human being walking slowly by. Ghost, that's what it sounds like. And that's kind of fascinating, because at night, you hear humans. Actually, it's just kangaroos walking by. Everything gets distorted because of your imagination. This is what fear does to you. So this is this is obviously what this is about, right? Is that hearing those things, and they get amplified, even though they're just natural things. They kind of seem scary. This is the Buddha to be, right? This sounds like human being, right? It sounds like how most people would react to a frightening situation. Then I thought, is this that fear and dread coming? Then I thought, why do I always meditate wishing or desiring that fear and terror to come? He has expecting here, but I think wishing and desiring is probably more, to my mind, more precise. Why do I always wishing this fear and dread, right? Why don't I get rid of that fear and dread just as it comes, while remaining just as I am? Then that fear and dread came up when I was walking. I didn't stand still or sit down or lie down until I had got rid of that fear and dread while walking. So the Buddha is the Buddha to be is challenging himself to overcome these things. He realizes that these things arise because of defilements. He has already said that beforehand. And this is a way of ascertaining whether you have defilements in the mind or not. It can be very hard to know whether you have defilements, because there comes a mind when the mind feels incredibly pure and very bright and very sharp. You can't see anything wrong in your mind. So you need to test yourself to see whether there still are some things there. And I think this is part of that test. And then once the fear and dread arises, then of course the Buddha will ask himself, why? What are the causes for this happening? Yeah, everything in Buddhism is about causality. Why do things arise? And when you understand the causes, then you can purify yourself further, and then you can eliminate that fear and dread as a consequence. So this is what I think is happening here. There is another way of overcoming fear and dread, and that is to develop metta. If you develop metta, the 4 Brahma Viharas, and you develop them fully, you will never have any fear and dread. And that is one of those things that I was talking about before. The psychology of people, or the mind, is such that if you have full compassion and metta for the world, if that is what you have, you will never see the world as frightening, because it feels like the world is kind of giving you metta back in a sense, yeah? Because all you see is the goodness in the world. The world doesn't seem frightening. And also, you're not afraid of dying anymore, because if you have metta, it is as if you have an intuition that even if you die, you know it's going to be good. Yeah, you know that nothing wrong can happen. So you are relaxed about death. If you're relaxed about death, well, there's no fear, because death is kind of the worst thing that can happen usually. So this is what he's doing, yeah? So he's then learning the causality. He does not sit down, doesn't do anything, keeps on walking to learn about these defilements, yeah? It's the kind of the courageous way of doing things. And we can do, maybe not exactly this, we can do similar kind of things, trying to understand the limitations of our minds. Then that fear and dread came up upon me as I was standing. I didn't walk or sit down or lie down until I had got rid of that fear and dread while standing. That fear and dread came upon me as I was sitting. I didn't lie down or stand still or walk until I had got rid of that fear and dread while sitting. Then that fear and dread came upon me as I was lying down. I didn't sit up or stand still or walk until I had got rid of that fear and dread while lying down. So it's this commitment to overcome things, yeah, which is kind of this is kind of what is so special about the Buddha, the fearlessness, the willingness to do anything that you can to overcome the defilements and the problems of your mind. And then comes quite an interesting little passage. I think it comes now. There are some ascetics and Brahmins who perceive that it's day when in fact it's night, or perceive that it's night when in fact it's day. So this is just a simile for the idea of delusion. Yeah? They are deluded because they see what is not there, and even if this is just a meditative power that they use, still it is a kind of delusion. They're using the meditation to see something that doesn't really exist. This meditation of theirs is delusional, I say. I perceive that it's night when in fact it is night, and perceive that it's day when in fact it is day. I perceive things as they are, is what the Buddha is saying. Yeah? I don't delude myself into a non-reality. And if there's anyone of whom it might be rightly said that a being not liable to delusion has arisen in the world for the welfare and happiness of the people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare and happiness of gods and humans, it's of me that this should be said. So this is, again, I think this is one of the main qualities that actually makes someone like the Buddha, or the Buddha to be able to become the Buddha, is this ability to deal with reality as it actually is, to see things as they actually are, not hide your head in the sand like an ostrich, yeah, but actually see things according to reality. This is the superpower of the Buddha, always dealing with things as they actually are. And this is something that we all should do, because if we live in delusion, if you live sticking your head in the sand, not really wanting to see things as they actually are, you're going to make lots of bad decisions in your life. All good decisions in life are made on the basis of seeing things according to reality. If you don't see things according to reality, there's no way you're going to be able to make good decisions. They say that ignorance is bliss, but ignorance is not bliss at all. Ignorance is dukkha. ignorance is problem. Yeah, ignorance may be bliss in the short term, but in the long term it's fundamentally problematic because you make all kinds of wrong decisions. And it's kind of very obvious, right? If you want to make a decision, you think that you have coffee in the cup, but actually it's tea. That's called delusion, right? Not very important delusion, but small delusion. And then you drink, and it's tea. Oh no, it's tea, it's not coffee. And then you kind of you suffer a little bit. Okay, very small suffering. Actually, I also like tea as well. I'm just being naughty. But you know what it's like? Sometimes you have I don't know if it ever happened to you, but you're about to drink something. And for a moment, you have the wrong impression of what you're drinking. Yeah, it's like you think it is Coca-Cola, but it actually is milk or something like that. Yeah, something completely different. And then you taste, it's like, whoa, what's going on there? It's like the Coca-Cola tastes really, really strange, right? Because actually it's milk. And that is kind of delusion, and there's a degree of suffering to that. So whenever we make a decision based on delusion, whenever we invest in the stock market, but we have wrong information, delusion about the stock market, we lose all our money. That's called suffering. Every time we are deluded, we make wrong decisions. We don't know what we're supposed to do. It is bad. So being clear about things, even though it can be very painful, right? Looking at yourself in the mirror, seeing that you're getting older. You don't really want to see that, but actually it is the reality here. Yeah, it is actually happening here. Seeing that you're getting weaker as you're getting old, things are kind of falling apart. Knowing that people are going to die around you is a very painful thing to be aware of because these are important people to us. And yet if we deny it, it's going to be much worse because then we can't even make good decisions in our life. We make stupid decisions. We go, no. Okay, let's leave that for now. I'll come back to that later on. So, non-delusion, incredibly important. And this is why the Buddha to be becomes this beacon in the world. Why he becomes a benefactor for everyone in the world. He becomes a blessing for everyone in the world because he sees reality. He has the ability to go beyond delusion. And when he sees reality, he can tell us about that reality. The Buddha says there is rebirth. If the Buddha says there is rebirth, good grounds for believing that there is rebirth. People think that somehow, because these scriptures are 2,500 years old, somehow because the Buddha lived a long time ago in a different culture, somehow those viewpoints are not as important. But it's just like going to university, going to school, and the teacher tells you that, okay, there was a Second World War 80 years ago. Do you believe the teacher that there was a Second World War, or do you just ignore the teacher and say that teacher doesn't know anything? You believe the teacher, right? Because why would the teacher lie to you? The teacher wants to kind of get the information out there. We assume that the information is correct. It's exactly the same with the Buddha, except that the Buddha is teacher number one, far more inspiring and interesting than the ordinary school teacher. And so just because the Buddha lived 2,500 years ago doesn't make any difference whether it's a teacher now or at that time. If you believe your teachers now, you should also believe the Buddha. In fact, you should believe the Buddha much more, because the Buddha is far more inspiring than any ordinary kind of teacher. We get these things wrong. I think it's because these things are ancient, because they are written in books and kind of looks like stories. It doesn't feel real in the same way as going to school. But the point is, it is just as real. It is not less real. And that is the kind of one of the hindrances, one of the blockages that we have to overcome to understand that this is actually just as real. And this is one of the great benefits of going to India, for example. When you go to India, you go to how many people have been to India? Wow, there's a few of you. Okay, cool. Yeah, me too, actually, by the way. Yeah. And one of the great benefits of going to India is that you go to these places described in the sutras and you recognize them. You think, wow, this is actually real. And then you start to feel the Buddha is not just a fictional character in books. The Buddha is a real person who lived, a real teacher, and someone who was extraordinarily inspiring based simply on understanding his words. You understand someone really exceptional here. So the fact that the Buddha says there is rebirth, we should take that extremely seriously. I think of all pieces of evidence for rebirth, the fact that the Buddha said it to me is the most important one. usually that kind of evidence is usually called anecdotal evidence. It's just an anecdote because someone says, I had this experience. But when the Buddha says it, it is like a very powerful anecdote. Yeah, it is like someone you really, really trust. They tell you about some experience they had, and you can't really dismiss it because this person is so trustworthy. There's much more evidence for the idea of rebirth, and there isn't, to my mind, really any good reason not to believe in it. Actually, there aren't any good reasons. People think that there are good reasons, but not really. It's just habits of the mind. It's just conditioning. That's really all it is. But these, to me, are some of the most important reasons. And it all has to do with how we relate to these teachings, how we see the Buddha as a real human being or not. It's kind of fascinating. It's all about conditioning, really. So the Buddha came into the world for the happiness. He divulges to us the secrets of the world, rebirth, karma, awakening itself, non-self, impermanence, these kind of profound truths about reality. He sees it for us, then lets us know about these things. That's why he lives for the welfare of humanity, because of that non-delusion, seeing reality as it actually is. So, of course, it would have been terrible if all there was, you kind of uncovered the delusion of the world and all you see is suffering. But, of course, the beautiful thing is that there is a solution to this. And that's what makes it so interesting. All right. My energy was roused up and unflagging. My mindfulness was established and lucid. My body was tranquil and undisturbed, and my mind was stilled in samadhi. The Buddha to be is overcoming those last defilements through this practice of testing himself out. And when those defilements come, then the mind becomes very pure and very powerful. The energy is one of the qualities that come up in the mind at this particular point. Because when the defilements are down, the defilements are what sap your mind of energy. Defilements are down, you feel naturally energetic. You don't have to try, you don't have to force yourself, you don't have to put forth a lot of willpower and these kind of things. The energy is there, and you have it with you. And it's unflagging, it's steady, because you keep those defilements at bay. This is what the Buddha is doing here. And this is beautiful, very, very powerful things. You may not realize this, but if you feel energized from within, and many of you will know what this means, it is easy to do things in the world. It is easy to live the spiritual path. It is easy to be kind. It is easy to do your work. Everything becomes easy when the energy is natural. The energetic people in the world are often the successful people because they are able to exert themselves and live in a good way. And with that energy comes often mindfulness. When you are mindful, you are also tend to be energetic. When you are energetic, you are mindful, because the energy is a positive feeling. It often comes with pamudja, the gladness, the joy. You are energized. It means you're also joyful. You're a glad kind of person, and because you are energized and glad and happy, you want to be present. The mind is here. You're able to deal with the here and now very easily. So mindfulness and energy are two sides of the same coin. They rise together. Mindfulness is established and lucid. It is clear. It is not confused. It is not kind of partial, but it's a strong kind of mindfulness. And when these things happen, the body becomes tranquil and undisturbed. This is the nature of the body. When you are really mindful, the body feels at peace. It doesn't feel restless, it doesn't feel agitated, but the body is kind of solid. And then the last one, when that happens, well, then the mind also, based on these things, samadhi, the stillness of the mind, the full meditation, deep meditation happens as a consequence. So what that little paragraph you're seeing there, what it really says, it is very similar to the 7 factors of awakening here. It's a similar kind of expression, because the 7 factors of awakening, they actually begin with mindfulness. From the mindfulness, you have the contemplation or the investigation of qualities, and then comes the energy, right? So it's a similar kind of, slightly different sequence, but the ideas are the same. And then from the energy comes the piti, the bliss, the happiness. From the piti comes the tranquility that you see here in the body. And from that tranquility of the body comes samadhi. The similar qualities and slightly differently arranged, but basically it's the same thing that you're seeing. The Buddha is building up the factors of awakening. And when you build up the factors of awakening, what happens? Awakening. Obvious, right? It's kind of when you see it. Let's just finish this off. So then comes the 4 jhanas. I'm not going to go through that now. 4 jhanas come. After the 4 jhanas come the recollection of past lives. Then comes the understanding of the kamma, how we get reborn. Then comes the destruction of the asavas, the awakening itself at the very end here. Yeah, you understand the 4 noble truths. And then you know that your mind is free, the rebirth is ended, etc., etc. And then at the very end, the Buddha says to this Brahmin, Janusoni, he says, Brahmin, you might think perhaps the Master Gautama is not free of greed, hate, and delusion, even today. And that is why he still frequents remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest. But you should not see it like this. Yeah, just because the Buddha still enjoys solitude and hangs out in the forest doesn't mean that he still has delusion. I see 2 reasons to frequent remote lodgings in the wilderness and the forest. I see a happy life for myself in the present, and I have compassion for future generations. And this is one of those things. If you are enlightened and you are practicing well, you enjoy solitude. Yeah, even the Buddha, he enjoys solitude. He doesn't really want to see too many people. And if you see someone who doesn't really want to, if you kind of come with Ajahn Brahmali and you feel that Ajahn Brahmali is a bit dismissive, you should be happy about that. It just means that he wants to go off and be by himself. Yeah, Ajahn Brahmali he's changing a bit now, but he used to be this master of dismissing people. Yeah, and I noticed when I was with, and he was kind of, he's quite subtle about it, but there is a kind of a clock in the dana hall in the monastery placed in a strategic location. And he would kind of just glance up at the clock, yeah, like that. And then almost immediately people would say, oh sorry, I got to go now. Yeah, it's getting a bit late. It's very powerful. And you find the same thing with the Buddha. Yeah, the Buddha is I think it's in the longer sutta on emptiness, the Mahasunyata Sutta, Majjhima Nikāya 122. You can check it out if you like. And in that sutta, the Buddha says, well, he goes into this very deep states of meditation, yeah, like the great meditation on emptiness and these kind of things. And he says that when you come out of those meditation and people come to talk to you, you automatically talk in the way to dismiss them. Yeah. Because you don't want to engage. You don't really, because it feels disturbing. It's painful to deal with people when you are so peaceful. And this is kind of the Buddha. Yeah, actually, seclusion. If you are really good meditator, you prefer seclusion as much as possible. And then there's the idea of compassion for future generations. Yeah, the Buddha, remember, is the example. This is kind of what the sutta is about. He's the example for future generations. He lives like that so as to ensure that we are all inspired to live in the same way. And that's kind of the point here. So there you are. That's the Bhaya-Bhairava Sutta, the Fear and Dread Sutta. In brief, I haven't done all the details, but I think I have maybe done those parts that might be the most applicable and most interesting. And so that is it for now. Please have a nice lunch together, and we'll see you back again at 2 o'clock, Eiling, is that right?
Yes,
2 o'clock.
Ajahn.
Excellent. Okay.
Your lunch.